Welcome back to Blue Zone Brief. Today's guest spent 35 years inside the traditional medical system as a pharmacist, as an industry executive. Before watching that same system fail the person she loved most, she left her career to find a solution to dementia. What she found changed everything she thought she knew about how cognitive decline works and what's actually possible. Susan Gibson is the founder of Vivolor Therapeutics and a certified ReCODE Practitioner. Susan, welcome to the Blue Zone Brief.
Thank you so much, Sean. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
We had a little bit discussion about how we're going to make the podcast, and you explained me pretty much your career, and I'm so impressed because I see that you went to Harvard. You did many things that build up your career as a strong, I would say, health and wellness practitioner. Yeah, Susan, you spent 35 years in the traditional Western medicine as a pharmacist, then working for pharmaceutical and medical device companies.
Exactly.
Yeah, but by your own description, you were doing it because you wanted to help patients.
Yes.
Now, this is common, but it's not. What happened that made you walk away from all of that?
Well, I'm not sure I would exactly call it walking away. I mean, I did start my own company, Vivolor, intending to find a solution to cognitive decline, memory loss, and dementia, because, as you mentioned, my mother, and this was with modest cognitive loss. She didn't know who I was. She didn't believe me when I said I was her daughter. And eventually she would go along with it and say, well, tell me about yourself. So she didn't remember anything about me. So I'm the tail end of the baby boomers. There aren't enough people to take care of all of us if we have the rates of dementia that we're currently seeing. So we need an answer. There must be an answer. So honestly, I prayed that God would show me the solution and started the company. And Vivolor has gone through a few different iterations. I would say that it's more augmentation to what is typically within, at least in the United States, in the traditional Western medicine world. So there are benefits of our current healthcare system, and there are definitely people who have been helped by it. I think my concern is that particularly in many of the chronic diseases, as a pharmacist in MBA, we learn about the drugs, and a lot of the medical system uses either drugs or procedures as their levers. And in chronic disease, it makes a lot more sense to get healthy and not have the disease and not need to keep taking pharmaceuticals for the rest of your life. So really I started looking for more holistic solutions that lead to health and get rid of the disease instead of just managing the symptoms of the disease on a regular basis.
Yes. Now, you quit your job, started a company, and by your own words, you were praying that God would show you the solution. Now, that's not a typical
No, not at all.
What did the first 2 or 3 years actually look like? What were you doing, and what did you do?
That's really interesting that you ask that, because this was the first time I really had combined my faith with my business. I had worked in standard business roles for 35 years, and I started praying. I actually had a number of what I call divine encounters. I was at a conference and I prayed one morning, God, I don't know what the solution is. I know you do. I need some sign that you're going to do this. I have no idea what the sign would be or how I'll recognize the sign, but I need a sign. And I left that and went to the conference and met with this pharmacist from Canada, and he says to me, 15 years ago, God showed me the solution to memory loss and dementia, and he told me to come here to this conference because there's something I'm supposed to do with it here now. I'm like, I think that's a sign. Anyway, so I had spent my career in pharmaceuticals, and I named the company Vivolor Therapeutics because I assumed that God would give me a therapeutic. That's what I knew. I mean, I knew how to define the clinical trials, and I knew every aspect of the pharmaceutical industry. And it took me a while, after a number of these kind of divine encounters, to realize that what God was leading me to was natural solutions, which is not really anything new. Half of all oncology drugs and 25% of all drugs for any indication are natural in their origin. The pharmaceuticals may be synthetically made, but using natural things for healing is not new at all. I mean, penicillin was bread mold, and digitalis from the digitoxin, cardiac medicine is from the digitalis plant. So it's not new to do natural solutions. I then went back and got a functional nutrition certification because I realized I have 35 years of traditional Western medicine. I don't really know the holistic side of things. So I got, additional education on that front. And I think both of them have potential, but it's worth educating yourself, because in the US, there became a split back in the 30s, and neither community likes each other very much. And the traditional medical community will poo-poo all of the natural solutions, even pursuing health. That's kind of not their angle generally. And the natural folks don't like the traditional medicine folks. So in Europe and in the Middle East and in Asia, for sure, they use both. But in the United States, we have a little bit of a vestige of our own system where the doctor has to document a diagnosis in order to get paid by insurance. So our medical system is more of a diagnosing and treating disease symptom, and it's not as focused on finding root causes and wholeness and health.
I see. Now, Susan, you had a 30-year career in this industry. You described it as structurally incentivized, to keep people sick. That's a striking thing to say from the inside. Did you see it at that time?
No, I did not see any of that when I was inside the industry at all. I, in all honesty, was working in companies, working on solutions to conditions that didn't have any drugs to treat them. My entire career, my purpose was to bring solutions for patients that didn't have solutions. And although I gave presentations to investment bankers on how the pharmaceutical industry worked and the level of risk and the cost of clinical trials, I still very much believed in the system during all of the time that I was working in it. I think the pandemic is one of the things that opened my eyes a bit, but the reality is that insurance drives the systems in the US. And as a pharmacist, I have watched over the years as the guidelines in various conditions have continued to change, which result in prescribing of more and more pharmaceuticals, and it's not always matching the science, because in many cases, like a high level of lipids in your blood is not beneficial, and it is a risk for cardiovascular disease, but that does not mean that always getting it lower is better, which is kind of where the system currently is.
Of course. Now, most people think of dementia as something that happens to old people. And I think once it starts, it's irreversible. Are you saying something completely different? I think. What is the specific reality that most people are missing?
Yes, so the pathology that leads to memory loss starts 10 to 40 years before you notice the first memory loss symptom. So the changes are going on in the brain. You're losing neurons, there's inflammation in the brain, there's free radicals attacking the tissue. You're getting the beta amyloid plaques on the neurons and the tau tangles on the inside. That's going on for a long time. The traditional medical community has some drugs that are approved, and they can do diagnosis and look at your performance or scans of your brain, but they don't, by and large, have solutions. So the traditional medical community will say, and every medical conference I went to, they would start the lectures saying there is nothing to prevent, delay, or reverse dementia. And the drugs that are approved, they don't change the overall trajectory. You're still losing cognition over time. You just lose it at a slightly slower rate on the drug than off the drug. So the medical community acknowledges that there are no solutions. What I did when I started Vivolor was I went to every lecture, every webinar, anything I could find where people had approaches to addressing cognitive decline to see who has things that work. And by far the best, without any close second, was a program called ReCODE. It's the first two letters of reversing cognitive decline, ReCODE. And it's an approach that's developed by Dr. Dale Bredesen, who is a classically trained neurologist, practiced at UCLA Alzheimer's Center and Buck Institute. But he became a functional medicine physician, which is additional training utilizing some of the natural holistic side, integrative medicine or functional medicine. And he has, for over 30 years, been looking for the root causes of the cognitive decline. And ReCODE is a method that looks across all the different possible causes and helps the individual to know which issues are contributing to their cognitive decline. And then we help coach people in how to move to a brain healthy lifestyle. So this is not like a magic drug that you take a pill and things go away. But at this point, I think there are probably thousands of people who have reversed dementia and pre-dementia and gone back to normal cognitive health and even continued to improve from that point if they fully implement the ReCODE protocol. And there are now 2 multi-center randomized clinical studies that have shown dramatic improvement in the patients. And this is at 9 months of utilizing the protocol. And many of the investigators will say that at 3 months after starting the protocol, if the patient is not seeing significant improvement, then we've missed one of the causes and we need to keep looking for what's contributing, because at 9 months, they should be better, 86% better on average in 9 months.
Okay. Now, if I may ask just one practical thing, I'm over 50 and sometimes it happens. It happens.
Yes.
I was in the car driving somewhere,
Yes.
and for microseconds or a few seconds, I forgot where I'm going.
Yes.
Is this a signal that there is something like, and I'm not the only one. There are many.
Oh, no. In our culture, I would say that most people over 60 notice some ways their memory is not as good as it used to be. That is typical in our culture. It's not normal and it's not healthy, but again, there are a number of things that contribute. And in fact, I had talked with a gentleman who was an executive at a number of companies. He said, there was a period of time when my memory was terrible. It was really problematic. And then my memory got better and I didn't do anything to change it. And in trying to be fair, he didn't know what he was doing that was contributing when he had issues, and he didn't know what he did differently when he got better. But there were dynamics that were going on, and part of the problem is it's a big black box to most people. So you can be under intense stress, and that in itself can cause.
That's what I thought, that probably because there were too many things in my head, or maybe, it was just break. But you said pathology starts 10 to 40 years before the first symptom.
Yes.
What does that mean in practice? What is actually happening in the brain all at that time?
Yes. Well, this is one of the challenges in my mind with what happens in a lot of the traditional medicine practices, is that they do scans and look at your brain, and it's helpful to understand what's going on in the brain. You can actually see where neurons have died. You can see sections of the brain that aren't firing anymore. The challenge is that it is well known that what's going on physically in your brain does not perfectly match how you're doing in terms of your performance. There is a gap between the two. And there's a famous study called the nun study, because they studied a few hundred nuns who have a very consistent lifestyle. They were willing to journal what was going on every year and do autopsies upon their death. And what they found, many of the nuns lived into their hundreds and had no sign of any cognitive decline. Their memory was fine. They were very functional. And the autopsies, they looked at those brains and said, this person should have had severe Alzheimer's. So we know that looking at the pathology in the brain is not a direct correlation with what's going on functionally. And so the diagnosis of dementia is based on performance. And when the person can no longer do activities of daily living, they can't comb their hair and brush their teeth and eat their food and get dressed. That's the point at which they call it dementia. But they have actually named cognitive reserve is the gap between the physical structure of your brain and your performance, because they know that there are things that people can do, like getting an education and continuing to use their brain, that can keep them functioning without levels of memory loss that you would expect based on the physical things that are going on in the brain.
Okay. Now, Susan, can you walk me through what you actually do with a client? Someone hears this podcast, they are worried about their memory, they want to work with you. What happens from the moment they reach?
Yes. So apollohealthco.com is the website, APOLLOHEALTHCO.com. That is where ReCODE is practiced. You go on and you join a subscription. You really only need a 1-year subscription to Apollo Health, and you check that you want to get your labs done. There, you will go do a blood draw, and the inputs are about 50 results of blood tests from that blood draw, an online cognitive test, and an online medical questionnaire. From those inputs and artificial intelligence, you will get a 60-page printout that tells you as an individual, here's your risks in these different areas, here's the optimal level of each thing. It has the information you need, but most people don't understand it, even though it explains things. They need someone to meet with them and help them understand. And they need someone to help them then move to a healthy brain lifestyle. So you would select me as a practitioner within the Apollo Health Co. system, and I would be able to see your report and see all of your results. And you would order time on my website, Vivolor.com, and I would meet with you on Zoom, and we would walk through your report, and I would explain it to you, and we would set up goals and help you start moving step by step to a brain healthy lifestyle where you're implementing the ReCODE protocol. And there are many other tools. The subscription to ReCODE gives you videos and town halls, and a subscription to Brain HQ for daily brain exercises. They have an app, you know, I have checklists, I have slides. So if people want to know kind of more of the scientific background and understand the areas better, I can walk through the slides at any level of detail they want. If they want just the high level takeaways. So it's a matter of educating the individuals at the rate they want on the topics that matter to them and are an issue to them, and helping them to identify those root causes that are contributing to their issues and eliminate those and move to healthy patterns.
It's interesting. Now, you mentioned these 60 pages personal report, you know. What's in it? And what does most people's reaction look like when they first see it? Because 60 pages,
it's a lot.
Not, yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So those 60 pages are based on the thought leaders and Dr. Dale Bredesen, and where he's found areas that are risks. He's brought in the best thought leaders in functional and integrative medicine in the world to educate on those areas. And all of their information has been compiled. So your report will say your results and how big of a risk your results are and what things you can do for your results. It depends on the individual. Some people are really hungry and they read their report in great detail and they just have some questions and want to learn. You know, there's a whole spectrum of how detailed folks want to get. The information is in there, but let's take one example. There's a test called homocysteine. And if your homocysteine is high, it means that you are not methylating well. Almost half of the population does not methylate well. And B vitamins are hugely important for the brain. And even if you're taking a multivitamin and getting B vitamins, our body needs to methylate them to get them into the form that our body can use them. So if you can't methylate them, you could take as many B vitamins as you want. Your body is still going to be deficient because it can't get them into a form that they can utilize. Your report will say your homocysteine is 12.3 and that's high. And that means you don't methylate well and you need to take these methylated B vitamins. The information is all there. But usually people they've never heard of it before. They need someone to, I mean, that's a simple one. Lipids and inflammation and toxins and hormones, you know, they're all topics that are deep topics that usually need more explanation to understand in more detail the actions that the individual wants to take.
I see. Now, you mentioned that by 9 months, the majority of your clients show substantial improvement. And
this is in the clinical study.
Cognition. Now, for people who've been told by their neurologists that there's nothing they can do, that must be really extraordinary thing to witness. What is the actual, what does that actually look like? Like, you know, when they say there is no help, but you have something.
Yes. Well, the whole approach of ApolloHealthCo.com is to start training physicians in ReCODE, in the processes that Dr. Bredesen and the other thought leaders have come up with, so that more of the community understands the data and the approaches and can implement them, or if they're not knowledgeable enough, can at least refer them to someone who can implement it. So there is absolutely an effort to try and get this more broadly known. The medical system and the funding of the medical system operates a lot on procedures and pharmaceuticals. And pharmaceuticals, if you're going to make $10 billion when you get your per year, when you get your drug approved, you can afford to do big clinical trials that cost $100 million a trial, which is what you need to do to get FDA approval. There is not a big income stream from getting someone healthy and keeping them healthy. So they have gotten enough funding that Apollo Health did implement 2 large multi-center studies with staggering results. So before that, there were a number of publications that Dr. Bredesen did of case studies. And I have read NIH articles where from 2000, from 6 years ago, where a physician was arguing that the data was insufficient and there were only case studies published. That has now been addressed because there is substantive data now. But even then, it's interesting to me to see physicians say there's something wrong with that. That person is getting people healthy and solving the issue, and I don't know how to do it, so I'm going to say that they're wrong and that it's not true, instead of, oh, I want to learn that. What are you doing? So it is a mind shift, which over time I think is happening as more and more people become aware of ReCODE and more healthcare professionals get trained in it, or at least understand enough about it to refer patients to people who can help. I will say that our culture has become an instant fix, instant gratification type culture. And many people want to just take a pill that solves everything. Yeah. And ReCODE is not taking a pill to solve everything. ReCODE does require being motivated. And some of the things are easy to address. If you have a deficiency in magnesium, that alone can cause dementia level symptoms. A deficiency in vitamin D or DHA, those can cause dementia level symptoms. That's very easy to address. Toxins and hormonal deficiencies and changing your diet and exercising and reducing stress and getting good sleep. The brain is extremely complicated, and there are a lot of different things that impact it. So we are looking very broadly when we are trying to identify the individual's personal risks. Do they have sleep apnea or some other sleep disorder? Do they have dental disease? Do they have heavy metal toxicity? Have they been exposed to mold? There's lots of different things to look at. Yes. So it requires motivation and commitment to change your lifestyle. So if people implement the protocol and change their lifestyle, they can reverse the dementia and even go back to a normal lifestyle. But you need to maintain that kind of lifestyle. And not everyone wants to quit eating sugar or get exercise and things like that.
Yeah, Susan, you described really very well, but you also told me a little bit of a healthcare system where the reimbursement structure actually works against prevention and health. That's a structural problem, not a personal one. What do you think it would actually take to change it? And where do you see any signs that it's shifting?
Well, there have been efforts. I mean, over my career, I've seen various structures. I mean, at least the healthcare system started paying for some classic prevention approaches, like mammograms for identifying breast cancer and colonoscopies. But those were changes. There have been efforts made at governmental levels to encourage that. There are things called payment for quality, where a pharmaceutical company would talk to the payer and say, you only have to pay if the patient's cholesterol reduces, or paid for performance, that if our drug can achieve the goals that we're talking about, we get, which is what should be done. But there's a couple of different issues. There's no transparency. So healthcare is the only industry where the person who decides what you get is different than the individual that pays for it, which is different from the person that it gets used on. You select a car, you choose the car, you pay for the car, you drive the car. The doctor decides whether you get a drug. The insurance company pays for the drug and you take the drug. It's completely disjointed. So the normal supply and demand doesn't work here. There's no visibility to costs. So some of the employers, because the employers pay for healthcare in the United States, did studies. And one study, they looked at the price of colonoscopies, which is a very standard diagnostic procedure. It's not going to vary a lot by a great practitioner versus a less trained one. And in the Bay Area, the cost of a colonoscopy varied from $860 or so to over $8,000, a factor of 10. But I tried to ask my doctor how much the colonoscopy was going to cost beforehand, and they could never even figure it out to tell me. So it would be like going into a grocery store, and there's a box of Oreos that costs $1, and another box of Oreo cookies that cost $10, and they're sitting right next to each other, but you have no price information, you have no health information, you leave and go home, and 3 months later they send you the grocery bill and tell you how much the box you bought was.
Yeah,
that's how our healthcare system works. And it is complicated, and there are patients that are more challenging than others. But if you went to an auto mechanic and they said, okay, it's going to be $4,000. I might fix your car. I might not fix it. I might make it worse, but it's $4,000. Would you go to that mechanic?
Yeah.
But that's what our healthcare system is. We pay for service. They pay for you to see a physician. There's no difference in the payment that that physician gets if they help you, if they do nothing, or if they hurt you. So our system is not set up for quality. It's not set up for outcomes. And you have more information about a restaurant that you go to than you do about a surgeon that's going to do your surgical procedure. How many of these procedures have they done? Well, what kind of results do they have? That's not available. So that there's not transparency. There's not transparency in pricing. There's not transparency in performance. So even if you want to be educated and you want to select, the information is not available to make good choices. And then you get your bill later and your bill is $30,000.
Yeah.
And you can't control it.
I remember you said, quote, you make more money if they stay sick. For someone who spent so many years working for companies in that system, what is it like? How do you feel like that being on the other side now?
Well, it's a very difficult issue to solve. And the structural incentives are not obvious either, because the physicians don't get paid when they prescribe a drug. But that's what they're educated to do. That's what they're taught. And they're not, well, now we're beginning to, I just saw something passed that physicians need to start learning about nutrition in the US. Historically, a physician has less than 4 hours of education in their total career on nutrition.
Unbelievable.
So most of the time, if you talk to a doctor about what to eat, they'll say, talk to someone else. That's not my area. They don't learn about vitamins. They don't learn about supplements. And in fact, most of them, I've seen brilliant thought leaders get on the internet and say supplements don't have any data. It's like, well, you haven't spent 10 seconds looking. I can give you 20 pages of studies on one supplement. There's a lot of data on these supplements. It's not as rigorously controlled as the pharmaceutical data, which makes it more believable and more real world, because in the pharmaceutical companies, we are very careful to include only the patients who are most likely to respond, exclude anybody that has other conditions, and you get the product approved in a very narrow population, then it gets used by everybody. You've got real world data at all kinds of different doses. Some of the studies aren't as well controlled because they're not paid for. They're done by universities, but there's a lot of data on supplements. So there's other options out there. It's mostly the way that the medical community, they are trained with guidelines. And actually, they're more treating the disease than you as a specific patient, because the guidelines for diabetes say, here's what we do. So we need to change the education of our physicians. We need to change the reimbursement. And it's challenging. It's a very complex system.
Yes.
But it seems to me that if you can figure it out for car repair, you could at least come somewhat closer to paying for the value of what you're receiving in healthcare if we had transparency in costs, if we had transparency in performance.
Yes.
But there's factors at high levels that prevent that from happening.
Now, you're not doing a lot of marketing right now, Susan, but client find you, for someone doing work this important with results this compelling, what's actually standing between you and reaching the millions of people you want to reach?
Dr. Bredesen does a lot of podcasts and education. So Apollo Health Co. as an organization is doing efforts. Vivolor now is just me, and I'm doing the ReCODE coaching over the internet, and I have a limited bandwidth and have some ministries and other things that I'm running. So I'm not at a place where I'm trying to dramatically grow my business, but there are other ReCODE practitioners out there, physicians, health coaches, nutritionists. There's a whole pool of folks. But I agree with you that there needs to be more education. And one of the big challenges is opposition from the traditional medical community, which is very sad. But as I mentioned with that one article, when you find someone that's figured it out, why attack them? Why not learn what they're doing and do it yourself so you can help your patients?
Yes. But if you could change one thing about how people find out that this approach exists, what would it be?
Well, just going to apollohealthco.com website, there's information there. It's a community that you can join.
Okay.
They have town hall meetings. You can ask questions. There's resources that are there. Or you can go to vivolor.com, my website, vivolor.com, and you can reach out to me and I can help guide you for how to do that. And if someone doesn't have much money and they don't even want to do all that, or they already have some blood tests, I can educate people in what the components are. With or without knowing all of the details, I can then tell them, you probably need to get an A1C to understand your blood sugar levels, and you should probably get a CRP to understand your level of inflammation, because we need to track some of these things. One of the nice things with ReCODE is there is a very sensitive and specific cognitive test that comes with the package. It's the CNS vital signs. It takes 45 minutes online. And that is what is used as a tracker. So you take that test again every month and you can see if your cognition is improving or not. And we know that generally people are declining. So if you start seeing, so there's a good way to track how well you're doing that is part of the Apollo Health Co system.
You said that your mission is to reach millions of people before they slide down the slippery slope. What does that actually look like? What's the version of Vivolor and this work that makes you feel like you've done what you set out to do?
Well, I started out doing something called Maximize Your Memory Challenges, which were online Zoom classes where I was teaching people what the literature showed about lifestyle changes that could improve your cognition. The
Okay.
overlap between what I was doing and what ReCODE does is tremendous. The difference is I was talking about it conceptually, and here you would actually have a blood level to know where you are, that we could optimize. So reaching millions of people, you don't, it's ideal that you start now. You can't start too young to develop habits that help optimize your brain health. And the
Yeah.
habits that optimize your brain health impact every other aspect of your health, because the rest of your body is connected to your brain. And almost all of those other conditions are risk factors. So actually, they've shown in the clinical trials that in the 9 months that you're doing ReCODE in the clinical trials, not only did cognition improve, but people got rid of their diabetes and their high blood pressure and their cardiovascular disease. It is moving to an overall health. And it is one of the most comprehensive views of your overall health that you could do.
Yes.
But I wouldn't wait until you have cognitive decline, and I certainly wouldn't wait until you have dementia. It is an effective approach at any stage of the game.
Is
But
there any, what's the next chapter for you personally? A program, a book, a different way of reaching people that you can hint at?
yeah, that's a good question. I think continuing to do podcasts like this and continuing
Yes.
to
Yes.
get the word out is a lot of it. And probably at some point doing some more classes to help teach people. ReCODE focuses on the medical aspects of cognitive decline. There are also a lot of emotional aspects. There are spiritual aspects. I mean, when your brain quits working, it impacts a lot. I mean, people get depressed, they get anxious, they start isolating, and your own thoughts impact your cognitive performance. The mind is very powerful. So there are a lot of other aspects of cognition that I'm interested in as well, and have done some teaching and partnering on in the past that I think are important for people to be aware of, so that they recognize in their partners and in themselves if they're starting to withdraw. What can they do? How do they manage that? So I don't think it's going to be a one-person thing. This is something that's going to
Sure.
require systemic change and continuing education. I will say that many of the physicians that were in the clinical trials for ReCODE have said that based on the amount of data that's available now, it's not really ethical to have patients not know about ReCODE, because we know there is an effective way for them at any stage of the game to improve their memory. I mean, you need to have a caregiver and you need help implementing it. You don't want to wait until someone gets to the point of dementia. But that even those folks can get back to a healthy lifestyle. So how do you not mention that to folks?
Yes. Now, for someone listening right now who is worried about their own cognition or watching the parents start to sleep, what is the most important thing you want them to hear from this conversation? And what should they do today, right now, before they close this podcast, if they want to take a first step?
Yes, well, really going to my website, vivolor.com, or to apollohealthco.com, is the best approach. I mean, I can tell you a few things about diet or exercise or stress, but the whole reason that there is a ReCODE system is that there are many, many different contributors. It can be stroke or TIA, it can be head injury, it can be sleep apnea or sleep disturbances, it can be, there are so many things. We need to look across everything. So, excuse me, there isn't a quick fix. I mean, certainly exercise and diet and taking supplements and addressing deficiencies of vitamins and deficiencies of minerals are a piece of it, but you really need to address all of it. That's why I even mentioned, even within the clinical trial, the principal investigators at the various sites said, if we're not seeing improvements at 3 months, we got to look for something else because we're missing one of the contributors. You need to find all the contributors, or you may or may not get the level of improvement that you're looking for. So it really does need a comprehensive approach.
Amazing. Now, Susan, this has been one of the most important conversations I've had on the show. Let me be honest, the idea that 95% of memory loss is preventable, that the pathology starts decades before the first symptom,
Yeah.
and that there is a proven protocol for reversing cognitive decline, that is not a small thing.
Yeah.
And
It's
that
huge.
is life-changing information for anyone who hears it.
Yes, it
I
is.
will thank you for the work you've done, the career you walked away from, and the courage to build something new when the system you trusted for 35 years couldn't help the person you loved most. For everyone listening, you can reach Susan through Vivolor Therapeutics at vivolor.com, and you can learn about the ReCODE program at apollohealthco.com. Yeah, we will
Exactly.
write down below the video. Susan, what's the best way for someone to reach you directly if this conversation has resonated with them?
Yes, at vivolor.com. They can email me at info@vivolor.com. That's the best way
Yeah,
to reach
great.
me. Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Susan, and I wish you all success in your business, and probably see you in a few months. We will discuss maybe some other topic.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Jan. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for helping us get the word out.
Thank you. Thank you.